So there are a couple of things that we are going to accomplish in this hour together, but one of the parts of the tagline for the event is celebrating successes. And there have been many successes throughout the last couple of years with this work, one of which is a partnership with WCTE Public Television in Cookeville, who did some incredible work around a 6-part docuseries as well as some public service announcements. So what we would like to do to start this session is to show you 2 of those public service announcements.
Everyone has an ACE score, whether it's 0 or 10 or whatever measure you're using.
ACEs, regretfully, tragically, adverse childhood experiences cut across socioeconomic levels.
Everybody has a collective role to play in giving kids safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments.
Learning about the ACE initiative and about building strong brains, how could you not want to be a part?
We are all in this together. Be part of the solution. Change the culture.
We know that brain development takes place from prenatal care really through young adulthood.
Adverse childhood experiences interfere with the development of executive control functions.
That chronic stress or toxic stress that we call it, we know can be very harmful, particularly to the developing brain.
You've got to have a good, solid, firm foundation. So safe, stable, nurturing environments.
We are all in this together. Be part of the solution. Change the culture.
So thank you for watching those with us. If you are not familiar with the entire docuseries, please know that you can find those on the Commission's website in the Adverse Childhood Experiences section, and they are fantastic and well worth the time. My second task of my 3 tasks in this section is to talk with you about the Tennessee strategy going forward. So again, building on the tagline and thinking through the imagining possibilities. So my instructions in this section are in capital letters that say very brief. So I am going to hit the highlights of this work for you. So during the course of the summer, the state coordinating team, representatives of the public sector and private sector steering groups, have been working with Liz Allen Fay and Rachel Moore Beard with strategy and leadership to develop a strategic plan to guide this work going forward. And so we have had the opportunity to spend a great amount of time together. And at this point, we have kind of boiled the work down and synthesized our strategies into some key points that we wanted to share with you today. And please know that you're going to receive more information about this going forward. But one of the things that we really fleshed out was, what is it that we want to accomplish with this work? And so there are 8 things that we're thinking through with this work. One is that we want there to be universal awareness and commitment. The second is that we want competent, committed, inspirational leaders at all levels. The third is we want broad community engagement. The fourth is a common practice implementation. The fifth is a system to organize data for analysis and shared results. Sixth is a targeted system-specific marketing strategies. Seventh is business engagement, advocacy, and investment. And 8th is a formalized infrastructure support. So those, as you can hear, are some lofty goals. But our plans for how we want to get there are that we want to sustain and enhance the effective strategies used to date that have increased public awareness and action. We want to support the extension of the scientific and practical learnings through learning communities and knowledge mobilization teams and efforts across the state. We want to continue to be good stewards of the $2.45 million that the General Assembly has appropriated for ACEs-related activities. We want to continue to cultivate 2-generation and 3-generation approaches to community solutions. We want to continue to seek input from stakeholders and those who know their communities. And we want to engage the business community to recognize the investment in children today is an investment in the workforce of tomorrow. So the philosophy of how we want to accomplish that is really through thinking about our work in 4 different buckets or 4 different priority areas. The first of those being a concept of engaging, the second being equipping, the third being connecting, and the fourth being supporting. So with engaging, our thought is engaging stakeholders, key leaders, and communities. With equipping, the thought is equipping providers and communities with tools and trainings. Connecting is the connecting learnings and sharing informations. And with the supporting, the thought is supporting with financial models, marketing, and infrastructure. And so on the back of the agendas or the programs that you guys were given or handed out that were at your seats, you're going to see a word cloud. And so those were the words that really rose to the top of the conversations of an all-day planning meeting, and really feel like those words reflect the goals and strategies that we hope to accomplish with this work going forward. So I know, again, that's just scratching the surface, but we wanted you all to have an idea of where we are with the thoughts of the work, where we want to go, and at least a preliminary roadmap of how we're going to get there as a group and with our efforts. So at this point, my third task is to really move on to the introduction of Fred Simmons, who is going to facilitate this part of our afternoon. And so we're incredibly fortunate to have Fred Simmons with us. Fred is a senior director with Casey Family Programs, and you'll see his bio in your program. But Fred is just one of those guys that you can't say enough good stuff about. He's just nice, he's smart, he's approachable, and he's really easy to communicate with and actually just kind of have fun talking with him. So Fred has spent a great amount of time in Tennessee. We're fortunate for the Casey Family Programs investment, not only in financial resources, but in the resources of sharing Fred with the state. So join me in welcoming Fred Simmons.
Thank you, Richard. It's great to be here. I want to thank Mary Rolando for giving me an almost impossible task to take these very bright, committed, innovative individuals, make sure they only speak for 3 minutes, and not make any mistakes when I introduce them. So if I make mistakes, I apologize. So anyway, it's great to be here today to take a quick look through the state via the ACEs-related activities in various sectors that have garnered nationwide attention, and certainly the work that you're doing here has garnered nationwide attention. One of the things we learned at the first summit was the importance of having professionals be proficient with cutting-edge technologies. So let's hear first about a cross-cutting discipline approach in academia to do just that. Kathy Taylor, Dean of School of Nursing with Belmont University.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I won't make you say it back. I'm really delighted to be here this afternoon to share a few details about our Belmont's Educating Trauma-Informed Professionals, or BTIP, project. We're so excited and know that providers in community and primary care settings can effectively address ACEs. Yet, there are no standardized trauma-informed care training models for educating the next generation of providers, and that's exactly what we set out to do with the BTIP project. To create an interdisciplinary, evidence-based, trauma-informed care curriculum for health and social work students, and to share information and lessons learned with our colleagues in the field along the way. We started by surveying our practice partners to learn what they thought new graduates needed to know about ACEs. We got some training ourselves. We did the Building Strong Brains training and took advantage of other opportunities. We assessed our whole health sciences and nursing curriculum, and at Belmont that includes nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, public health, and social work, to discover that we were teaching ACEs concepts across the curriculum, but those concepts were not easily connected between the courses. So we identified some courses where ACEs content would fit best, and then we worked with frameworks and other content experts to develop some standardized modules for those courses. We did some early training with about 300 undergraduate and graduate students, and at the completion of that training, they indicated that they thought it was very important to their career. They reported increased knowledge about ACEs science and about trauma-informed practices, and they reported plans to use the concepts in their future practice. Then we turned to the community. We did trainings for about 500 community stakeholders from across many disciplines, and more than half of them reported gaining new knowledge about ACEs, an increased desire to learn more about ACEs, and plans to use their knowledge to network with one another, other professionals, and to influence existing policies and practices. Along the way, the grant funds allowed us to purchase some amazing learning aids like virtual and other dynamic simulation materials, to establish an ACEs Learning Resource Center in our university library, and to provide information sessions for any number of disciplines and community partners. We also learned that a standardized toolbox is a really good idea and can be useful, but that modules will likely need to be modified for a particular setting and in those courses. We look forward to continuing our internal curriculum work and sharing with our practice partners as we have in the past in the coming months. But our next plan is to expand this work into the College of Theology and start to reach out to faith-based communities here in our community. And we are so energized by this work and incredibly grateful for this opportunity to contribute to a healthier and brighter future for Tennessee. Thank you so much.
It is thought that notwithstanding what is known about negative effects of ACEs and toxic stress on long-term health, medicine is one of the most difficult sectors sometimes to penetrate. What can be done about that? Let's hear from Dr. Seth Scholler, Professor of Pediatrics, Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Department of Pediatrics.
So thank you, Fred. I'm delighted to be here, and I just want to share one of the solutions we've been working on there at Vanderbilt related to assessing and mitigating ACEs. I'm a general pediatrician, and I help train medical students and residents. And in the theme of celebrating successes, I have to say that when I first started at Vanderbilt, one of the residents would come to me and ask about what to do with a child who was hitting or having some aggression, oftentimes the first solution that the resident would come up with would be to say, well, just put the child in timeout. And now, 20-some years later, one of the first responses out of a resident's mouth is that the parents should try to redirect that aggressive behavior toward a more positive behavior. So I think we're seeing a shift there in terms of what residents are learning and what they're telling parents. So I'm a general pediatrician. I really am really interested in public health and data and research, and one of the things we've been working on is how do you integrate an ACEs screening tool and do that in the context of a really busy primary care clinic. And before I talk about one of the solutions that we've developed, I want to just mention a couple of the challenges. And one of the challenges is that we need to have an ACEs screening tool for pediatric primary care that is pediatric oriented. It's great to assess what is going on with the parents and what the parents' ACEs score is, but we also need to know what stressors are happening in the child's life. We're also going to need to have a screening tool that's valid, measuring what we think it's going to measure. We also need to think about how on earth do you assess child abuse in the context of pediatric primary care. I can almost assure you that any pediatrician who even insinuates that a parent is abusing their child, it is probably going to be the last time they see that family. So another issue there is going to be training. How are we going to train pediatric providers there to use the tool and to access resources, ideally that are evidence-based? Thanks to the Building Strong Brains funding over the last few years, we've been able to test an ACEs screening tool, and our screening tool is a little bit different from other screening tools. There are lots of ACEs screening tools out there. For example, there's Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris out in California who has a really nice screening tool. Our tool is different from all the others, at least that I've seen, in that it also includes parenting assessment. And I feel like that's just really important. If we're going to get to the bottom of ACEs, we need to know what parents are doing there with their children as they interact with them and they discipline the children. So Over the last 3 years, we've screened approximately 1,000 parents of young children, everywhere between the ages of 6 months and 10 years, or the ages of the children. And our screening tool is a 25-item questionnaire, and there are approximately, 13 questions that addressed some of the typical ACEs, like the exposure to divorce, community violence, mental health problems. And then we have a special section, 12 items, that's devoted just toward looking at parenting assessment or parenting strategies. Things like, has a parent in the last month, spanked their child or threatened to spank their child or yelled or spoken angrily. Those are some of the kind of what we call parenting-related ACEs that we know can be associated or maybe even precursors for child abuse. So, and what have we found? We found that in general, parents are really receptive to the form, and we haven't found anybody that's really just irked or been really offended by the form, so we've been happy with that. We found that parents who are younger and parents who have lower education status tend to score higher on the parenting score, which is what we might expect. And we also found that parents who score high on the unhealthy parenting part of the questionnaire also tend to have children who have more behavioral problems, conduct problems, and attention problems. So we feel like that suggests some element of validity there for the scale. Our next steps are to try to integrate our ACEs screening tool into the pediatric primary care visit, and that's what we're working on really diligently this year. We have an ACEs algorithm for pediatric primary care providers. The ACEs algorithm splits into two different pathways. One is a parenting score, and one is another childhood stressor score. And if a child scores really high on the other childhood stressors score, like exposure to divorce and mental health issue and community violence, then the higher that score is, the pediatrician is trained to refer the family, or at least suggest to the family that they might benefit from a mental health provider assessment or a counselor or seeing a social worker. Now, if the parent scores highly on some of the unhealthy parenting strategies, then the general pediatrician or healthcare provider is trained to intervene with a brief intervention to educate parents about healthy discipline strategies. We've been testing a program for the last, about 16, 17 years. Pediatricians can introduce the healthy discipline program in just a minute, and very quickly what we essentially do, we introduce parents to a question that I think we should be introducing all parents to, and that question is, assume you see one young child hit another, what are you going to do? The reason why that question is so important is because it addresses early childhood aggression, which is a strong risk factor for violence, and that question opens up the door for discussions about healthy discipline strategies that can be used not only for childhood aggression, but other challenging childhood behaviors. And then essentially what we do is we show parents a list of different options, 20 different options, and then the parent gradually learns that maybe using redirecting is a lot better option than yelling or spanking or constantly putting their child in timeout. So our next steps are to do more ACEs implementation work, and we're going to be working with organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics, and we also work with the Prevent Child Abuse Tennessee with testing the brief intervention in a home visiting program. Please, as we go along, you do have to consider time. Consider the time frame 17 years. That's the average amount of time that it takes for a program that we know works to actually be integrated into the healthcare system. But I'm convinced that with the dedication and commitment of people like you, that we can make that time frame a lot shorter, and before too long have an ACEs assessment tool that includes a parenting assessment component that can be integrated into the busy pediatric primary care health system. Thank you very much.
Children and youth spend much of their time in school, and each one of them have a unique learning style. It is notable that Tennessee was rated as the fastest improving educational system on the nation's report card in math and reading. However, we also are interested in what is being done to address other factors that influence learning. Pat Connor, Executive Director, Office of Safe and Supportive Schools with the Department of Education, will share some of what is happening in Tennessee.
I'd like to start out by sharing a story about a little girl in kindergarten. When the little girl got to school in kindergarten, her behavior was not exemplary, to say the least. She had angry outbursts, she didn't get along well with her other classmates, and she did not follow the directions or instructions of her teacher. Her teacher had no idea what to do about her behavior. What she didn't know at the time was that the little girl was being sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend, something that continued for a year. What the school did to try to manage her behavior was to suspend her for kindergarten at least 3 times that year, pretty much to try to be a wake-up call, but it wasn't. After a year, the boyfriend was finally arrested for drugs, and the little girl came forward. However, she didn't get the help she needed, and the spiral continued. Her mother became a drug addict and prostitute and left her to live with her great-grandparents. The school had her tested and classified her as emotionally disturbed. But there was still no counseling, and by that time, the girl's grandparents didn't know what to do with her either, and her behavior continued to spiral downward. In the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grades, she was suspended multiple times. And finally, in the 6th grade, after threatening suicide 3 times, 2 of those at school, she was placed in the behavior classroom at the alternative school. Her story is very much like the story of other children across Tennessee who have experienced adverse childhood experiences educators are most times ill-equipped to handle. Educators are desperate for help to meet the needs of these children. This is something they did not learn in their teacher prep classes, for sure. This is something that we've learned in the department is an emerging and critical need for our educators. In response to that demand and the cry from our educators, we developed the Building Strong Brains Strategies for Educators curriculum to train educators about how ACEs affects brain development and to shift how educators think about children affected by ACEs, especially their behavior. To date, we have 5,000 on our poster, but we've trained over 7,000 educators. This year, because the need is so great, we are implementing the Building Strong Brains Trauma-Informed Schools. Schools wishing to become trauma-informed will submit, and today's the deadline, an application which is competitive, and there are no grant funds associated with this, to become trauma-informed schools. If selected, the schools will receive in-depth training and support to transition to trauma-informed practices, not only in the classroom, but in the school. If they do not make this first round, this first cohort, there will be a second, and there will be a third. To date, as of today, at 3 o'clock, we have received 135 applications. It's tremendous. One school applying for the application, wrote the following: while attending Building Strong Brains Strategies for Educators training, our staff saw the faces of our students throughout the entire workshop and wanted to know, what do we do next? The department's goal moving forward is to help our educators know what to do next. Thank you.
In addition to in-school, after-school programs augment classroom experiences in many ways and can especially be effective in promoting socialization. Let's hear next about Project Ruler and how its focus on social emotional development is strengthening after-school programs in Tennessee. Dr. Heather Wallace, University of Tennessee Extension Service, has been actively involved in this work.
Can you all see me? I'm going to come out here. Can I? Hi. Okay, so who did you think about earlier when we were talking about someone special in our lives? Who were you thinking about? Was it someone who hurried you through time and space? Or was it someone who listened and took time to guide you and help you unpack those big emotions that we all experience? Well, I'm guessing it's more of the latter. At least for me it was. And now think about a fourth grader out there in the world who's navigating adverse childhood experiences of a mother battling addiction, where they're living in poverty. Who's there for that child? Who's there for them when they have those big emotions? Who's listening and teaching? Well, in 7 rural Tennessee counties, it's UT Extension working with after-school care providers to do that. And what we're doing is we're pioneering the nation's first foray of the use of the ruler approach. And it is an approach based out of Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and it's dedicated to helping youth recognize their emotions, understand them, express them appropriately, label them, and react accordingly. And when we empower children with the language and the voice to recognize what they're experiencing, maybe then we can start to shift our communities towards a culture of compassion and engagement rather than this reactivity of just being angry. So what we've done is educated the after-school providers in these 7 rural counties. And one of the very first outcomes we've already realized is that before we can even start working with the youth, we have to start with the adults. They have trauma, they have experience. And so we had to dial all the way back, and we spent our first year working with them because they're not counselors, they're not psychologists that can really work to unpack this. They needed the care just as much as the children. And what we have already found is that when we provide that education and those tools to manage those big feelings, that it's all trickling down to the children. So our goal is really to think about where that 4th grader who's enrolled in one of these programs is going to be in 20 years from now. What are those cascading effects? Without the ruler program, where does that child end up? With having the tools that are provided, that child can have language and skill to manage the emotions in ways that we can shift that reactivity to be a compassionate culture, and so that we can make ACEs an antiquated notion. It was interesting that earlier Mr. Rogers was quoted and referenced, and I just want to end my 3 minutes with a quote from him. And it says, "Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our own feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone." UT Extension is so excited to be some of those people helping to have those talks and to build strong brains. Thank you.
Nationwide, can you hear me? Okay. Nationwide, infant mental health has gained a great deal of attention, and certainly so in Tennessee, with recognition that bonding and attachment are critical for healthy child development. We ask, what is the court's role when infants and toddlers come to the attention of the court? So let's hear about best practices from Judge Sheila Callaway, Davidson County Juvenile Court, that is doing some really important work around engaging families in order to help with the trauma caused by some of the reasons why the children come to her attention.
As I think about the role of the court, when you think about children and toddlers that come into our jurisdiction, there are so many court examples that I can tell you. And it explains to us why we cannot wait. And the one example that I want to bring up is very similar to the one that Pat just talked to us about. I remember recently I was in court on a termination of parental rights petition. And as I read through the petition and as I heard about this mother, I recognized her name. And it hit me. This was the same girl who is now a parent that was the subject of a neglect, dependent, and sexual abuse case. She was removed from her mother who was an alcoholic and a drug addict, her mother who allowed her boyfriend to sexually abuse her father who was incarcerated during the time, and she became a part of the Department of Children's Services custody. And here we were, 12 to 15 years later, terminating her rights to her children. And it just reminded me of how we as a court system failed. And it reminds me of why we cannot wait. And that is why it is so essential that we support the Safe Baby Courts. Specialized court programs that are established for infants and toddlers. We focus on that 0 to 3 years because we know that is the most crucial time for brain development. And we know if we neglect those time frames, that all we're doing is setting up our child to fail yet again and to become another part of the statistics. And so the 4 focal points that we focus on when we talk about Safe Babies Courts is number 1, infant mental health. And the goal is to reduce maltreatment and traumatic experiences during the significant brain development of our infants and our toddlers. Number 2, we have to focus on intergenerational trauma, focusing on repairing these parents so that they can parent appropriately and effectuate change in the young lives child as adults. Third, we have to do family engagement. Although it's called baby court, the focus is on repairing the family and all that comes with that. That's both parents, that's baby mama, that's play mama, that's auntie, that's uncle, and that's grandparents, all of them at the table and participating, allowing the family to fully have a buy-in to their own change. And finally, team collaboration. Safe Baby Court strives to find new ways for our families to connect with our community service providers and provide a strong foundation for infant mental health. And when you think about baby courts, you think about best practices to reach permanency quicker with the hope of keeping families together through stability. And that's exactly why we cannot wait. Thank you.
I'd probably be remiss not to thank Senator Hale because he, at the legislative level, I'm sure others as well, really supported the implementation of the Safe Baby Courts here in Tennessee, which are, I think, can be a national model for the rest of the country. So thank you. Tennessee is the recipient of a major multi-year system of care grant. Already there has been tremendous momentum in East Tennessee to address trauma-responsive services community-wide, including those involved with the justice system. Becky Haas Community Crime Prevention Programs, Johnson City Police Department will provide us with information on what's going on. I think it's East Tennessee, right? Okay.
Thank you. I was first introduced to the concepts of trauma-informed care in the ACEs study during the summer of 2014. In my role in the Johnson City Police Department, I knew I'd found a missing link that addressed the community challenges we faced. In 2015, partnering with Dr. Andy Clements from ETSU Psychology and technical assistance from SAMHSA's National Center for Trauma-Informed Care, we set out to educate our city. In less than 3 years, we've reached over 3,400 professionals from almost every sector. In June of 2016, we began a trauma-informed system of care meeting, which consists of only 2 things: coaching and cheering. Coaching helps advance our partners in their journey from trauma-aware to becoming trauma-informed, and celebrating is for cheering program advances. So what have we celebrated? For Topper Academy, all staff received training. The decision was made to implement school-wide, and attendance in 1 year increased from 52% to 86%. Students earned 1,055 credits compared to earning less than 200 credits the year before. Graduations rose from 6 to 65 and raised the Johnson City School System graduation rate by nearly 2 points. For East Tennessee State University, President Dr. Brian Nolan has tasked a group of faculty to create the first trauma-informed university. ACEs will be part of student education, and the university procedures are being reviewed to become more trauma-responsive. At the Johnson City Police Department, officers are now receiving trauma-informed policing training with a new post-certified course, and we're partnering with our schools to implement Handle with Care. For Frontier Health, Trace's foster care means that parents who, after receiving trauma-informed care training, report feeling better equipped to understand the children that they serve. At the Boys and Girls Club, resiliency abounds in the Treehouse Calming Center, and staff understand the kids that are trying their patience most are those that need them. At the Niswonger Children's Hospital, a team led by CEO Lisa Carter is developing plans for training all hospital staff, identifying ways to reduce trauma for children and adults served at the hospital, as well as new types of community outreach to prevent ACEs. For pediatrician Karen Sketsina, this means screening parents and children for ACEs during routine visits. Those scoring a 2 receive an office consult explaining the impact of ACEs can have on health, and those scoring a 4 or higher receive additional case management from social work staff on staff at the clinic. These are only just a few celebrations that were reported by System of Care champions last week in Johnson City when SAMHSA leadership came to co-host a forum in Johnson City recognizing us as a national model. I've heard it said that becoming trauma-informed is not a destination, but a journey. But in Johnson City, we're grateful to be on our way.
The character, assets, and challenges of communities vary greatly across Tennessee and between rural and urban settings. Let's hear next from 3 communities with very different approaches to addressing ACEs and the community conditions that contribute to them. First, Emily Parton, Director of Grundy County Schools Family Resource Center and Discover Together Grundy, we'll talk about the effects in Grundy County to reduce the effects of isolation and poverty in the rural area. And I had the privilege of visiting this program a year or 2 ago, and I look really forward to seeing how it's evolved over the last year or 2.
Thank you. I'm not sure I can speak as quickly as you did because I am from Appalachia and we tend to draw things out. But it is an honor to be here and speak to you on behalf of all the rural counties in Tennessee, recognizing that most of Tennessee is rural. I'm going to be talking specifically about Grundy County, which is in the Appalachian section. And a lot of times when you think of rural areas, you immediately think of it being laid back, stress-free, a place to get away from it all. But for those who live on the mountain all the time, it is a place where you're away from it all the time. And so in the ACEs world, being away from adequate resources can induce toxic stress. Research reveals that scarcity impacts brain development. I was at an ACEs training a couple of years ago when they were just beginning to think about poverty or growing up in poverty as being the next ACE or next adverse childhood experience. And at first I thought of poverty as just simply being lack of financial resources, but the more that I think about it and the more I study, I realize that it encompasses so much more. Scarcity of time, of living wage jobs, of educational opportunities, of quality early childhood programs, even scarcity of a safe place to exercise, or scarcity of a safe place for families to come together and meet together for support. All of those are happening in our rural areas, all of that scarcity of resources, and it begins to take a toll on the lives of parents and caregivers of our young ones. Indeed, just like the scarcity or the lack of parent-child interaction, the serve and return impacts brain development of babies, Scarcity directly impacts or impairs cognitive function in adults, which can lead to poor decision-making, ultimately exacerbating the condition of scarcity itself. So there's not only a shortage of the physical resources like money or time, but also a deficit of cognitive resources like attention and executive control. In other words, when robbing Peter to pay Paul, our brain gets hijacked, causing us to focus only on the immediate issue, often leading to poor decision-making and perhaps even to the neglect of positive behaviors like closely attending to our own baby. And the cycle begins. Vulnerable parents raising vulnerable babies. In Grundy County, which is up on Mont Eagle Mountain, if you don't know, we understand the need for 2 generational models that increase protective factors for the parent as well as for the child. Through programs like Discover Together, Safe Baby Court, telemedicine, telehealth, evidence-based home visiting programs, early Head Start, we are surrounding the family with services while working collaboratively to build new family support models that are specific to rural areas. A very promising model is our vision of putting as many resources as possible under one roof, our old high school, where we hope to at least take the stress out of knowing where to go to get the help you need. We ask lawmakers, policy shapers, and philanthropic foundations to consciously include resources for the parent in every decision made regarding the well-being of the child. We must break the cycle. Thank you.
Emily had told me that last time she had an hour and a half to say what she just said in 3 minutes, so I'm impressed. The United Way of Greater Chattanooga organized community affinity groups to begin to address ACEs. Let's hear about this effort and how it has been sustained over the last several months. Jamie Bergman, Vice President of Impact Policy and Advocacy with the United Way of Greater Chattanooga, has been actively involved in this work throughout the year or so that they've been doing this.
Good afternoon. I want to start out first by a quote, and this means a lot to our community as well. I alone can't change the world, but I can cast a stone across the water to create a ripple, Mother Teresa. We have changed that to we in Chattanooga. We had a community summit, and it was very, very successful around a year ago, but after that summit, we have been really working closely in our community to bring everyone together to address ACEs and to address what we can do about ACEs in our area. With our summit was actually a 2-day event, and we had the First Lady, and we also had Dr. Pat Levitt, who was from the Center for the Developing Child. So Dr. Levitt came, and we kind of punished him for 2 days because he spoke to 5 different work groups. And then he also was the keynote speaker for our community summit. The 2 days were dedicated to these workshops and included legal, medical, mental health, faith-based, child care, youth professionals, parents, school system, government, and businesses. And it helped to broaden the awareness and education around the impact of ACEs. But after that, with over 600 in attendance on these workshops and the summit, we had over 200 requests for additional trainings. So what we tried to do is to organize ourselves in Chattanooga around not only our trainers who were trained by the frameworks, but also our group called the Chattanooga 2.0. This is an educational movement in Chattanooga from the cradle to career, and it looks at early childhood, K through 12, and of course the secondary and beyond. So we partnered with them, and at the summit, we introduced something called Chattanooga Basics. And this is basically an easy tool for parents that they can give tips, exactly what they can do with their children when they're in the grocery store, when they can just be working with them. Very, very easy things to do. So we introduced that at the summit, and then we have a goal through the Early Matters Coalition, which became the early childhood part of Chattanooga 2.0, to develop strategies to inform and educate parents, and also to engage parents through parent support, and to continue building the awareness of ACEs and the impact as one of the major strategies. The Early Matters Coalition formed the ACEs work group, which includes trainers from the Chamber Advocacy Center, Helen Ross McNabb Mental Health Center, Prevent Child Abuse, and of course United Way, and others are joining every day. This was just a handful of trainers, and we were trying to coordinate across all those requests that we were getting across all sectors. So therefore, we have these trainers that were going out as often as possible from their own organizations and being paid for by these organizations. And to date, from a year ago from this summit, they provided over 115 ACEs trainings to over 2,700 people. That's in just 1 year. This includes the Department of Education, guidance counselors, social workers, all the ones that have called to ask us from the different classrooms, private school staff, Head Start, Early Head Start, child care providers, 6 local universities, their faculty and some of their students, local youth programs, mental health, health department personnel, Kiwanis, Rotary. And to date, we're also working very, very closely with our mental health court with training all of the city police. Our chief of police, Chief Roddy, is a very big advocate of ACEs and ACEs training, and he believes in a top-down approach that all of his officers will be trained in this because they are also on the front line of some of the things that are causing ACEs. When they go into a home and they have to deal with a family issue, they want to also address the issue of the children. We also had a back-to-school bash this year, too, called Camp K, and that's Camp Kindergarten. And so in part of that, all of the parents that were attending also attended ACEs trainings. So we're continuing to develop strategies, and we're also looking at ways to address resilience and what type of work we could do around those. A lot of people are asking, okay, I've got ACEs training, now what? What do I do? What if I've experienced ACEs? What if I don't know how to address the children in the classroom? We've even trained our 211 on how to answer those questions so the calls can come in there and be routed to the right mental health organizations and other communities. But we're also trying to get more and more information out there. We're working with our local PBS station this fall to do ACEs screenings from the videos that were produced and with work groups attached. So this fall we will be incorporating all of that with our PBS station and trying to have satellite stations across the community to address that as well. They've also added this to their Explore Health program, a whole segment just on ACEs. So we are continuing this work. We're looking into policy. I myself have gone to United Way Worldwide, Day on the Hill, and I've taken ACEs information to both our senators and our congressmen. Also, the United Ways of Tennessee have their Day on the Hill, and all of our legislative delegation has received ACEs information, many of them who are very much in support of what we're doing and also what they're doing across the state. We're focusing on prevention, youth resilience. I'm working with local communities as well as on the ground with district leaders in our neighborhoods. United Way's new vision is a connected community changes everything. And we really believe in this. We're really trying to advocate to broaden awareness and work directly in neighborhoods and to also to be able to look at issues of advocacy where we can also help federal, state, local, and actually expanding more of what we're trying to do. One of our champions is here, Judge Filia. Sorry to call you out. But he and I worked with the city on an editorial, and I want to close with a quote from that. Actually, the editorial was called Childhood Traumas Require Whole Community Response. And the quote is, Abraham Joshua Heschel famously said, there is no limit to the concern one must feel for the suffering of human beings. In a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. And it ended with this editorial, but the entire Chattanooga community has a responsibility to these children for their sake and ours. Thank you very much.
Collective impact is based on recognition that many sectors working together have greater capacity to influence change than any of them singularly. ACE Nashville is based upon the premise, based on that premise. How does one measure collective impact? Kristin Rector, President and CEO of Prevent Child Abuse Tennessee, will talk about that, and she is part of the ACE Nashville work.
Good afternoon. In a fourth grade classroom, a girl named Lana is asked a question by her teacher, Ms. James. Her answer is wrong, and her classmates giggle, as fourth graders do. But Lana's reaction is an outburst of screaming, slamming her desk, and throwing a book to the floor. The other kids in the class look to Ms. James to see how will she react, and they are quite surprised. You see, Ms. James has already received a Handle with Care notification from the Trauma-Informed Schools coordinator letting her know that Lana's family has had an interaction with the police department in the previous 24 hours. She's had coaching on how to handle that situation and helps Lana regulate her systems and points her to the nearest peace corner. She knows how to not re-traumatize Lana in this situation. Across town, police respond to a call about a domestic dispute. The officers are slow to judge and quick to understand how those involved in the dispute got to this place. The entire force has been trained on trauma-informed practices and approaches to each situation with this in mind. Don't judge my actions until you understand my options. These things are not dreams. This isn't just an idealistic vision of the future. These things are happening. Collective impact based in Nashville, called All Children Excel Nashville, or ACE Nashville, is realizing these things and bringing them into reality. We envision commitment to implementing trauma-informed care and building trust in the communities that we all serve and trust among our partners and each other. These things are happening across sectors to include city leaders, police departments, schools, neighborhoods, civic organizations, service providers, and so many more. ACE Nashville's membership is now comprised of more than 200 individuals representing more than 50 local public and private organizations and entities. We are committed to sharing data and utilizing the public health approach to mitigating and preventing ACEs across sectors. Our plans for the future include helping parents understand their child's developing brain and know that it is okay to reach out for help when they need it. There's no stigma attached to that. Policymakers that are educated on the impact of ACEs and utilize this wisdom in all their decision-making, sharing data across sectors and systems to better serve families as they need support, and organizations, including businesses, schools, and systems that understand how to implement trauma-informed approaches their employees and their clients so desperately need to be successful. Every day we are making progress. We have supported implementation of trauma-informed schools, created trauma-informed templates to help communities create approaches that are trauma-informed, and trained over 15,000 community members and service providers on building strong brains, among so many other opportunities. Our constant vision for Nashville is to be a safe, stable, and nurturing community for everyone who lives here. Thank you.
We often hear the question, now that we know, what do we do? The faith-based community is mobilizing assertively to address the conditions that contribute to ACEs, none more effectively than in Memphis. Let's hear now about the impressive results of strategies to reduce violence from Charlie Caswell, Associate Pastor, the Memphis House.
All right, how y'all doing today? If you can, just for a minute here, imagine with me a community where the police, the pastors, the politicians, the parents, the principals, the proprietors, and partners are working together to communicate, collaborate, and connect together for one issue, the old African proverbs, how are the children? With that single focus in the Fraser Raleigh community that is happening, we began to focus on that, had some of the highest arrest rate of our youth going to jail, with some 700 youth a year prior to us coming together in 2016 for the top 10 incidents in our community. We had the highest murder rate of 36 individuals murdered in our community that year. Since we came together and began to sit down with the prosecutor's office, the police officer, where the district attorney put a community prosecutor in our precinct and a juvenile prosecutor in our precinct, being trained by Dr. Althea Stewart in the University of Tennessee on adverse childhood experience, we began to ask the question, it's not what's wrong, but what happened. And when we begin to ask the question, what happened, we began to see our juvenile rate last year go down to under 250 youth in our community, some 78% decrease of juveniles who actually went to jail. Not only did we see our juvenile rate go down, last year we went 50% of the murder rate in our community, and this year we at about 50% right now this year. Our conversation have led to over 160 individuals within the community on the ground, pastors and other church leaders getting involved in their community, where it have now the district attorney and the police department looking to place this in all 9 of our police precincts in the city of Memphis, the same model of 7 Ps coming together to make a collective impact in our community. When you all come together and we work together, we can change the outcomes that's happening in our community. Thank you.
The media plays a... You got a little bit taller on me, didn't you? The media plays a role in influencing culture change, a goal of BSB, Building Strong Brains, Tennessee, acronym, right? Okay. Has been to raise public awareness about ACEs. Is this happening? Let's let Cindy Putman, project manager of WCTE, Ready to Learn, address that question.
I think we're all aware that media is a proven storyteller. Just look around the room. Most of us can't live without it, and some of us hate to live with it. Research says that in 2019, people will spend about 170.6 minutes each day on some multimedia platform. Now I want you to think for just a moment about the roaring Mississippi River and the beautiful mountains of East Tennessee. And here we are in Middle Tennessee, and that stretches from the border to the north, south, east, and west. But one thing that all areas of our state have in common is that we have public television stations that reach 98% of all Tennesseans. WCTE, my local PBS station in Cookeville, Tennessee, was honored to produce a 6-part, 30-minute standalone documentary called Building Strong Brains, ACEs, The Tennessee Story. And when I look around this room today, I feel like I know so many of you because I watched hours and hours and hours of videos where you graciously shared the stories about the work that you are doing. You are the boots on the ground of the ACEs initiative. So I encourage you to look at your program that you have in your hand today, because on the back there is a link to the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, and it says ACEs. If you go there, you can view the videos, and you're going to recognize some of the faces of people that you know. One of the things that I think is so important about the role of media and what you all are doing to raise awareness about adverse childhood experiences through informing, educating, and communicating to our fellow Tennesseans the research and the realities behind behind adverse childhood experiences. And when we do that, we can change the way that all of us communicate, collaborate, and commit to creatively carry the ACEs message to change the culture of our state. Now, I would be amiss if I did not quote Fred Rogers, because he is our PBS hero. But Mr. Rogers said, and it's my favorite quote because I was an elementary teacher for 24 years, anyone who does anything to help a child is a hero to me. So I'm honored and humbled to stand on stage and in a room full of heroes today.
So when I first had the privilege to come to work here in Tennessee for Casey Family Programs, I met the deputy governor, who at the time was a commissioner, and I told him how proud I was to be able to work with the state of Tennessee, and he said, well, Fred, it's not the state of Tennessee. So he pulled out his lapel pin and showed me the 3 stars on there. And basically, I may not get this right, but basically Tennessee is really 3 states. I think we've heard from all of Tennessee and from the 3 states. So let's give the group a good hand now.
So as we prepare to move to the next section, I really would like for you to see the last 2 public service announcements that WCTE prepared. So if you'll join me in watching those before we thank our panelists one more time.
We have this set of adverse childhood experiences. We also have a set of resiliencies that can buffer us from the toxic effects of those adverse experiences. Living in a city that has safe neighborhoods or safe playgrounds, having a secure relationship with one or more adults in your life is a resiliency factor, and that's a really critical component. So resiliencies can be internal to the family or external community buffering factors.
We are all in this together. Be part of the solution. Change the culture.
Everybody has a collective role to play in giving kids safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments.
It is the people's problem. The people is the community.
It takes every community member being responsible and really playing a role.
We need everybody to come together as one, as a unit, and really become a community.
Be who you needed when you were younger.
We are all in this together. Be part of the solution. Change the culture.
So join me in thanking Fred Simmons for moderating the panel and for all of our panelists for offering their information and their work. Also, while we're in the thanking people mode, let's go ahead and thank Renee Wilson Simmons for doing a fantastic job moderating the entire event today. So every organization, every agency has their own culture, and that culture is developed over many years by many small and subtle things, some of those being just phrases that you hear over and over. And at the Commission on Children and Youth, our former executive director created that culture in part by constantly reminding us that nothing is impossible if you don't care who gets the credit. And so although that has become part and parcel of the fabric of the culture at the Commission on Children and Youth, I believe there's a time where we need to thank people and recognize people and give people lots of credit for the work that they do. So it's my great privilege this afternoon to be able to recognize some folks who have done incredible work over the last couple of years to have us to the point where we are today, to have created the success that we see and have seen today, and then also to lay that solid foundation for the work to continue. So I want to take a couple of moments to recognize some champions of the work, and I'm going to ask them to come on the stage as I call their name and ask them to stand here until we've recognized everyone. So to start us out this morning, we acknowledged that the governor and the first lady are truly the champions of this work as well. So if I can ask Mrs. Haslam is gone out, so we will just be reminded that the governor and the first lady were recognized earlier. I would also like to ask Deputy Governor Jim Henry to join me up here to be recognized. I think anyone that has been... I think anyone that has been around this work, even for a short amount of time, will know that without the deputy governor, without his commitment, without his passion, and without his strong instructions of what we should do, we wouldn't be where we are. So thank you very much. Also, I'm not certain if he has come in yet or not, but want to recognize Senator Mark Norris for all of the work that he has done. We have recognition and a gift for him that we will be certain that he gets. I would also like to ask Barbara Holden Nixon with the ACE Awareness Foundation to join us. I remember having the opportunity to ride in a car with Barbara and was talking about the ACE's work that she did. And so what she said is that for many years in Memphis, they just kind of drove around. They weren't sure what they were doing, and they've kind of built things as they've gone and as the work has progressed. And so I would argue any day that we wouldn't be where we are with this work as a state if not for the work that Barbara led and initiated in Memphis. So thank you. I would also like to recognize Adrian Johnson Williams, who is formerly with the Pyramid Peak Foundation and is now a special assistant for strategy and planning with the Office of the President at Lemoyne-Owen College in Memphis. Adrian, through her work at Pyramid Peak Foundation, really provided a great amount of the financial resources to incubate the work in Tennessee. So thank you, Adrian. Also, I would like to ask Fred Simmons to join us back on stage, and even though his colleague Zainab Shaheen is not with him, want to recognize Fred for all of the resources and the support and just encouragement and acknowledgement that he's provided throughout all of this work as well. Also, it gives me great privilege to ask my former executive director and boss of 20 years to come be recognized, Linda O'Neill, former executive director of the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. There are so many stories I can tell you, but definitely just Linda just is a taskmaster with making sure that this message infused everything that happened at the commission and used her influence to ask that same content spread throughout partner organizations as well. So thank you, Linda. And next to last, I would like to ask that Mary Rolando with the Department of Children's Services join us as well. So Mary is just a tireless planner, organizer, taskmaster with this work, and has done a phenomenal job of corralling all of the personalities that serve on the public sector, private sector steering groups and the state coordinating team, and really has in many ways been the backbone of the work that's happened. So Mary. And last but not least, I would like to ask Kristin Keeley-Dinger to join us as well. And Kristin is the president and CEO of the Healing Trust here in Nashville, who has just been an incredible partner with all of the work as well. So thank you so much. So let me step aside so that you can all praise these people one more time for all of their work and for being the champions of where we are in Tennessee. So before I turn things back over to Adrian, that's going to just take 30 seconds, I do want to take a point of privilege in that, as many of you know, organizing an event like today doesn't just happen. And that there are a million details and a million moving parts, ranging from what color tablecloths there should be, to what there should be for lunch, to the order of the speakers, to the gifts, to all of that. And so I know the folks that spent just hours planning this would never want to be recognized, but it's important for me that they are. So again, I'd like to recognize Mary Rolando and ask that she stand. I would like to recognize Samitha Keller with the Commission on Children and Youth, and Jeannie Henry for her work, as well as Bonnie Beneke, again, with the Department of Children's Services. So thank you all for thanking them for all of the work that they did to make today happen and run as smoothly as it did. So Renee, all you.
This is absolutely no exaggeration when I say I have never, ever moderated or attended a conference that actually ended on time, ever. And we have 3 minutes, and I'm gonna make sure that happens. So I have one question for you. Did I keep my promise? I promised at the beginning that this would be enlightening, that it would be energizing, and that it would be inspiring. And I think it's been all of that. So thank all of you for your role in that. I greatly appreciate, and on behalf of Building Strong Brains Tennessee, express appreciation for all of you staying engaged, staying involved, and helping to celebrate the progress that's been made. And so I want to end with a Native American proverb that seems especially relevant, and it's the following: we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And that is so very, very true. So I hope that we channel the energy, the creativity, the wisdom that was shared during these sessions into actions that help us meet the very consequential responsibilities that lie ahead. And so I thank you, and good evening.